No doubt this week, the worst comic book was from DC Comics. It was Wonder Woman. I don't even know what issue in it is anymore.
10.
It just all blends together. 10.
It does blend together.
And at this point, Jim, I've read every issue. It is a train wreck, and people say you should walk away. I can't walk away. That's how bad this is. Tom King has done a lot of damage during his time at DC, with Heroes in Crisis, with what he did Batman, Strange Adventures. Almost everything that he's done has damaged the character. I don't know that he's damaged Wonder Woman yet, but as far as storytelling, this is the worst Tom King comic book I've ever read in my life. It's fucking awful.
Yeah, I don't even think there's a story here. He starts off things with this idea of a villain that's kind of interesting, but then doesn't do anything with it. There's a war going on between the U.S. and the Amazons. You barely can tell that. And in the idea of ruining a character, he seems to be trying to convince everybody that he's the only one who realizes that Wonder Woman's good, and he's going to explain that. That seems to be the gist of this. So he's not going to ruin the character, but maybe eating a rat might have ruined it for some people. But in the meantime, what he does, and he continues in this issue, is he starts to mess with the continuity and the overall timeline. When he starts talking about characters, he adds things in, his little bit of a, hey, look at me, I'm clever, and I know things going on. But it does kind of skew the continuity a bit when he's talking about the different cheetahs in this and stuff like that. That's the only thing. But that people can get by that. What you do get, though, is he's ruining my brain because this book stinks and it's boring and there's no story at all. And I just don't get how anybody could like this.
This should be the breakout event for Daniel Sampry. Maybe not becoming a superstar, but pretty close to it. And it's not going to happen because it's so shit. No one that likes Wonder Woman or really DC Comics at this point would read the book. The only people still reading this are the Tom King fans.
Yeah.
Because they don't like superheroes.
Again, they're Tom King fans. And what they'll tell you is that everything Tom King does is the greatest version of a character. So they don't seem to be a fan base that, as a whole, I mean, I'm being general with this, but they're not going to go off and read other books because that's not Tom King. And so it's this weird insular-y type deal that is always on the offensive. They always want to fight. They always want to get upset when you point out something, and there's always something to point out. And there's stuff in this issue that just the way it starts, it doesn't even make sense, right?
There's only one appropriate response to a Tom King fan trying to explain to you, mansplain to you why this is a good story. Bitch, please.
Yeah, that is actually the appropriate one because you can't win. It's that fight that you can't win because that's what they live. It's not their opinion. They live it. And you can't fight somebody like that. So they end up whatever you say. I mean, I go and I talk about this book and they start arguing about Mr. Miracle. And then suddenly they tell me that they'll give Tom King 10 out of 10s because he saved their life. It's that crazy. It is kind of a cult at points. And I don't get it. I'm not part of it. That's for sure.
Leading into this issue, we are on issue number 10. Wonder Woman has been brought to her lowest. She was meant to feel like what it was like to be under the patriarchy at the hands of the lasso of lies. She was forced to not eat for days and eat a rat that she'd become friends with. She could not be broken. Somehow she's broken out of this prison, despite Sovereign having her there, dead to rights. She had no powers left. She was very, very weak in state. He just let her break out to find an island to find out Cheetah was there, who he had put there because she was hungry, so Cheetah will eat Wonder Woman. Yeah. That's the fucking premise of the book. I'm not lying.
No, and I'm even going to go further and say that the way that they play it out, because the Sovereign, whether or not he broke Wonder Woman in this prison where she was delirious, she's having, of the mind dreams of a patriarchy, and then realizes, like, I haven't broken you. Well, you know what? We'll break her another month or two. Like the idea that she ate a rat, now she's befriended a rat. The whole story came down to, and I said it's like the Michael Jackson song and then Moby Ben. She became friends with the rat. Okay, you know what you do? You take that rat away, lock the door again. It feels like, I think that he not only let her escape, he threw her on this island. She landed on this island. They made her go there.
So Cheetah would eat her.
So Cheetah would eat her. And then by the end, Cheetah then says, oh, I get it. You went through all this to come save me. But yet she never would have known this was going on. Also, just as an aside, Wonder Woman there laying on the beach, like she could just fly back to the U.S. and fight the people, the sovereign, all that, but you don't have that. You end up where they say in this, oh, Cheetah's on the island that only has coconuts and ants, which is completely insane. But this
is also ridiculous. The island where Cheetah's from?
Yeah, but then they say it's Cheetah's Island, but then I think that kind of gets pushed away. Like everything is for Tom King. What I say, and people laugh at me, is that the reality of his books is not a set. He has such a weird thing, and it's comic books. But in your book and what you're setting up, you have to have that reality. You have to have what is going on. And in this, he says there's only ants and coconuts. Later, you'll see birds flying around and things like that. I'm like, you just make up shit, and then it just gets wiped away because it's for a moment. And then the moment's gone and you go further because there's a lot of bullshit in this book where nothing happens. I don't know how you could have as much bullshit in something where nothing happens at all.
Supposedly they fight for, I guess, a week or two straight.
Yeah, Cheetah's still hungry, by the way. She was so hungry, she takes a chomp out of Wonder Woman's shoulder. But then they fight for weeks on end, but that's fine. They just keep fighting. Again,
because Cheetah's so hungry, she's now Diana Prince's match.
And that's, again, this is what Tom King seems to be doing in this, especially this issue. He's trying to prove that he's smart. He's trying to prove that he knows better than all of us because it's this big play of, Cheetah, not quite like a Joker, not quite like a Lex Luthor to Superman. They're not quite the opposite and things like that. And I'm like, you're not really telling a real point here. You're just pointing out things, but there's no real oomph at the end to say, oh my God, he's right. Wonder Woman doesn't have a great rogues gallery, whether you love Wonder Woman or not one of the top rogues gallery. Maybe go with that. Why is this huge character? Why doesn't she have a huge, and you might be able to come up with something clever with that, but he doesn't. He just ends up having this idea talking more about Joker.
But you can't buy into it because you know that there's no way that Cheetah's going to eat Wonder Woman for dinner.
Yeah. And for a fact that Wonder Woman isn't gonna kill Cheetah to stop that. By the end they're gonna hug it out. Just 11 issues ago in the Clune Red run, when they ended the run, Cheetah was part of Checkmate and working hand in hand with Wonder Woman. And it doesn't make sense in what led to this either.
No, and they fight apparently for a couple of weeks. Cheetah's about to kill Wonder Woman and finally get that dinner she's been looking for.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman cries out, "But I love you," or something. You. I don't know. Then they hug it out. She's like, I wasn't mad at you. I know you better than anybody, Diana. You don't have to be strong in front of me. You can cry. Like, what the fuck?
And this is supposed to be feels moments. These are the things that a Tom King fan will eat up because in the moment, if you don't know these characters, you might say, oh, that's really nice. Wonder Woman's big villain actually loves her and is nice and they're there. But in the overall storytelling and it's nothing. And also just to point out, the hell are we doing here when we're supposed to be having a World War VIII against the Amazons versus the U.S.? We have seen nothing. And the weird part is the only time we've seen anything of this war was in that Amazon attacks book by Josie Campbell, I think it was. Why? Why is that the only thing? Nothing has weight to it. Nothing feels big.
Well, I think it was issue number 2 or 3. Wonder Woman specifically said, I'm going to go out and investigate and find Emily, the lady that killed all those dudes in the pool hall. Yeah. No mention of the character since.
Just to get everybody riled up, I said on our Patreon Spotlight, we had this book. I said she's the OJ of the DC universe. She said she's going to go and investigate, find the writ. Never does, because I guess there is no
Never
other
even
thing.
Tried.
No, has done nothing. And wouldn't that have been a cool play? Because through all this series, she has told everybody not to help her. Even the Wonder Girls had to fight her to help, but yet they're just the Three Stooges. But in that, wouldn't it have been cool to have an issue where Batman comes in and they actually investigate what the hell happened? And then you have, I'd rather have that than fighting Cheetah for days and weeks on end when she's hungry and wants to eat Wonder Woman. Like, make it big, make it feel like it means something, but he's not done that since the beginning.
The ending is the Care Bear stare. We all love each other, and that's why we're not going to kill each other, even though that was the premise, I guess, of the entire conflict. But they just decided to stop because Tom King just decided it needed to happen. Now, the art by Daniel Sampere is great. It looks good. It should be a fun issue to read just by looking at it. But there's something that's gone on basically the entire run, except for, I think, when they went to get Batman a present in space or whatever. the overarching narrative that's going on the entire time from the Sovereign, who I believe is in prison, explaining the story of Wonder Woman to Trinity. And it is so boring. And
It's so boring.
He doesn't talk like normal people. He's supposed to be regal, but all he's doing is talking about how great Wonder Woman is. It's like, and then she fought for days, and we thought the Wonder Woman was done, but she prevailed, and we realized we were follies forever trying to stop the Wonder Woman. He's been saying that for a fucking year now.
And every sentence he says makes him less of a villain, makes him less of a threat, because it's, this is why if they have
he's not a threat because we know he's in prison.
And he's in prison. It's like having the Super Bowl video for the Chiefs. Brock Purdy's narrating and just saying how great oh man, I wonder how this is going to end. Oh man, it's just bad. And it's boring. And so you also have more of a telling, obviously, than seeing. So it gets boring. You don't really connect. And it just ends up being an overall narration that's just, you kind of tune out at points. But then even in this, just to prove the deal of Tom King and how he goes with things, Yara Flor is in this book. You have the Wonder Girls. Yara Flor, she talks like Tarzan. She talks like a caveman. And I often joke when me and you are doing our deal where everybody sounds Russian or whatever. But Yara Flor herself, she grew up in Idaho. She's actually, grew up her whole life in Idaho, yet she talks because all he knows is, oh, she's a Brazilian Amazon. But that's not quite the character. And he ends up with at one point, she's amazed. She's looking down when they're in the invisible jet and it's like, me, look at man's world and it looks beautiful. I'm like, this is a girl who grew up in Idaho. Stop it. He doesn't know the characters. Nobody is right in his books.
Well, especially not his villain, fucking Sovereign. He's completely boring.
Yeah.
There is a side adventure with the Wonder Girls looking for the invisible jet. And of course, Cassie bonks her head because she can't actually see it. And there's a switch that makes it kind of like you can see the invisible jet, but they don't know where it is. And at one point, I think they eject Donna Troy from the cockpit. Yara Flor is a complete moron.
I don't know about how she flies.
Batman doesn't allow Robin to drive the Batmobile. And then she says, well, if anybody's Robin here, it's Wonder Woman to me. It's like, come on, you were from fucking Idaho.
Yeah, I know. She talks like Tarzan. She's like, me, you're a floor, you, Robin. And even then, the idea, this guy wrote Batman, and he's like, Robin never tries. That isn't even true. All of this just feels like a joke. It feels like the guy, there's
but it's not funny.
It's not
funny.
And I mean a joke as in I'm reading and like, what a joke. It's not funny. And this is why when people end up wondering why Tom King writes things out of continuity, it's because he doesn't care or doesn't know continuity. That's the reason. When you had that Adam Strange Adventure book, that was going to be a regular in continuity book until they read the script and then suddenly said, oh, it's Black Label out of continuity because he didn't get the characters and it ruins things and whatnot. Like you said, this doesn't ruin characters, but it doesn't get them and it doesn't advance them at all. It's him giving his manifesto of what he thinks these characters are and wants praise for knowing that there were cheetahs in the past, but that's different continuities, that's different timelines. And as he says it just doesn't make sense. And there's no reason for it. You find that these info bits out and it doesn't do anything for the story. It's just him throwing info at you. And it's a shame that Daniel Samperi has to sit there and think of, okay, I'll draw them sitting here. I'll draw them doing this. And any fight you get has been, they fought for weeks. They fought for days. It doesn't mean anything anymore.
No. The only people getting anything out of this book are Tom King, his therapist, and I guess Tom King fans. I'm shocked that he still has them. But they'll claim this is the greatest Wonder Woman book of all times. But upon further investigation, if you actually talk to them, you'll find out they've never actually read a Wonder Woman book ever.
Yeah, this is their first. Or if they did, I mean, even if they read the Clunrads before that, that's not quite reading Wonder Woman. And when you talk, well, what's the overall story? You get what happened in the first 3 pages of the first issue, and it never goes past that. The Sovereign is trying to do this. An Amazon ended up killing a bunch of guys. They're at war. That's the overall story. We haven't had that since like 3 pages into this whole thing. And we're at issue 10. And we have and now what's
shit
that?
Is happening off page Apparently, Sarge Steele turned on the Sovereign.
Biggest thing in the issue.
When the fact that happened,
right? The biggest thing in the overall story. They mention it as if they almost forgot to bring it up. They're like, oh, by the way, that Sarge Steele, he let us use the satellite to find Wonder Woman. Pretty crazy, huh? What do you think they'll do to him? Do we have to save him? That's the biggest thing in the overall story right there. And it's off panel and just kind of shoved aside and even treated as kind of a joke. Yara Flor, we not help him. And then the others say, hey, we're going to help him.
Yara Flor angry.
I'll tell you.
Fire bad.
He's so over the top. And he just doesn't get the idea that she was raised in Idaho by her aunt and uncle, I believe it was. And those all this is just so bad. Every time she popped up, I laughed. But again, like, what did you get? You even got most of the Rogues Gallery fighting Diana in Washington, D.C. Something that should have felt big. Something that should have been, oh my God, like and it was over in a second with just like one page for this guy, one page for that. And it just never played out because he doesn't really have a story here. I think that they asked him to write Wonder Woman. Don't think he had a story to write. I think that he's just making things up as he goes. Doesn't really feel like it's any bit inspired.
I don't understand how James Gunn could think this guy is a good comic book writer. James Gunn does good stuff, and he's obviously got a good feel for characters. But when he says shit like Tom King is my favorite comic book writer right now, it fucking scares me.
Well,
because he sucks.
Again, when you say that, and I like James Gunn, I know that some people don't, whatever. But when you say that, oh my God, what you're trying to do, because, Johnny Nebraska, this guy has no idea who Tom King is, so that's not going to be. What he's trying to do is win over comic book fans. He's trying to win over DC comic book fans, almost giving the idea of, look at me, I know what things are like. Hey, I'm one of you. And when he does it, you look at him and like, you just went down like 3 rungs on my respect level because you don't know what's going on. But yet the guy wins awards, which we know are bullshit. The fans, they are diminishing, I think, a diminishing factor. But they're very loyal to him. But that's not enough. These stories aren't great. If this was a movie, what we've had so far, I mean, page to page going, it would be the boringest thing we've ever seen in our life. This would be like My Dinner Andre, the Wonder Woman years. It would be the boringest shit ever.
Absolutely. So scoring it, I give the art,
it's tough.
Big time props. You want to almost go like 2.5 just for the art.
Yeah.
But the story is so bad, you got to deduct points. I'm at 1.5 out of 5. 3 out of 10, maybe.
I can even go 3 for the art. But the story's like a -1.5 or minus what it's bad. So I'm just going to go. I'm going to be the positive one with a 2, maybe a 2.5. But it is all art. And the one bit of them mentioning Sarge Steele, I'm like, okay, that might be interesting. The worst thing, too, before we end, is that this now goes into 3 issues of absolute power, which you would guess you can tie in the Sovereign to that. But you would almost say you're not going to be able to progress the story much in an event. It's going to be tied into the event, obviously. So when are we going to get to a story? We're going to have 20 issues of this bullshit with nothing happening. How can you defend it? How can you sit there and say that this is the greatest thing ever? It's not. It's really frustratingly bad.
Tom King fame's the worst. That's the only conclusion I can come up with.
Yeah, I have, I deal with a lot of fandoms and things like that. When you say something's good or bad, you'll get some people say it. But there's no worse in my mind in comics right now is straight up just a Tom King fan, because they will not listen to any reason. You can point out things, they won't listen. And again, I think that's what Tom King feeds off of and knows. And actually, I think that he ends up using them in that way, that he knows that he really doesn't have to do much and they're going to love it. He has these takes. I mean, we don't talk about the backup, and the backup Kite Man shows up. I mean, Jesus criminy. When are we going to stop this nonsense? And just can't take it. 2.
Nor
2
can
I'm
I.
going. 2.
But Jim and I will persevere, and we will continue reading Tom King's Wonder Woman, because you just can't look away. It's a car wreck at this point. But Jim and I do read basically all the new big releases from Marvel, DC every single week, all the new big releases from any comic books. And we talk about them on the Patreon because there just isn't enough time here on YouTube. It's like a 2.5-hour podcast. We also talk about what it's like to be a dad. Jim has much more disgusting, dangerous stories than myself, because my kids are little and his are grown and all that stuff. Yeah. But if you'd like more of this kind of flavor, there's a link in the video description to the Patreon for a whole lot more fun.